Hello there, and welcome back to the wrap-up edition of CMIS422 for Chapter 12. We are running a little long Thursday evening, so there are just a few more things we need to talk about with regards to digital forensics, which is the last topic in Chapter 12. And digital forensics is all about figuring out what happened after the fact. So after something bad happens. And remember, the likelihood, the chances of something bad happening, of your company getting a data breach are pretty much 100%. So it's all about the initial incident response to the data breach. And then, not long-term, but kind of medium-term, a couple of weeks going forward, there's this data gathering and analysis process that we go through called forensics. Well, Scott with Emerson gave us some examples of doing forensics after the fact on kind of internal, I won't say breaches, but data leakages from internal employees. Sometimes this forensic process leads to enforcement of an internal HR policy, but typically it's with regards to an external data breach. So trying to figure out what the vector of attack was, i.e., how did the malware get into the network, for example, and then gathering evidence and probably doing a root cause analysis. What was the root cause in terms of, was it a server that didn't get patched, and why did it not get patched? Well, because this patch didn't go out on time. Well, why didn't it go out on time? There's a school of thought that says root cause analysis is about 5 whys. If you ask 5 whys in a row, why did that happen? Why did that happen? Why did that happen? That's going to lead you ultimately to the root cause. So root cause analysis is a good skill to work on. And then evidentiary material. If you took IT audit and control, this is different from material evidence, i.e. relevant evidence that you gather for an audit. Evidentiary material, think lawsuit. There has to be if you're gathering evidence to work on legal proceedings, there has to be a chain of custody of evidence. Now, this is something that law enforcement is going to help you with. If you bring in the FBI to do digital forensics, which frequently is the case, law enforcement is going to be responsible for the chain of evidence, but this is something that's good for cybersecurity people to be aware of, that the handling of the evidence has to be very well documented. Now, when you're cleaning up the mess afterwards, there are kind of 2 approaches that companies take, and they're sometimes a hybrid, but option number 1 is just to fix it and move on with your life. And by moving on with your life, I mean you get back up to normal operations, and you have to inform the people that were infected. So if customer data was impacted, you have to reach out to those customers. But beyond letting them know, and if you're a public company, so you're required to file a report of any data breach with the SEC if you're a public company. If you're a private company, it's the right thing to do, and pretty soon it's going to be required in all 50 states. But the reporting and the time frame for reporting is different from state to state, which makes it really thorny, especially if you have customer data, customers from all 50 states, and you're trying to comply with all 50 states. Again, in general, if you're the strictest privacy laws seem to be in California, so most organizations try to be compliant with California law for reporting. That keeps them out of hot water. But just fixing the problem and then moving on with your life. Option number 2, we don't get over it. We want to find the people responsible and prosecute them. That's a long, drawn-out process that requires a lot of time, energy, and attention. Why does one business do option 1 and another does option 2? It depends on the business and the business requirements and the industry you're in. So if this were a breach of a military installation, obviously there's going to be lots of follow-up and lots of prosecution to the full extent of the law. If you're a retail operation, your job is selling product. And anything that distracts from your core mission, maybe it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. But this is a decision that your executive team has to make. I would say more companies do option number one than option number two. Also remember the embarrassment factor. To pursue and prosecute means kind of going public to some extent with what happened, because then it becomes a matter of public record, which a lot of companies don't want to have happen because it can affect their market share, their stock price could go down, any number of things. Now, for a formal forensics methodology, this is a good example of maintaining a chain of custody for law enforcement. So identifying all the relevant evidence and acquiring it without alteration or damage. So hard drives don't get damaged, they just get grabbed. You're not making a copy. Depending on how you make a copy, maybe it's not an exact copy. Law enforcement needs an exact bit-for-bit copy, and really law enforcement doesn't want a copy. They want all the originals, the actual hardware that was impacted. And then number three, make sure that just at every phase of gathering evidence that it's authentic and it's unchanged from the time that it was seized. So, for example, you grab a hard drive and you lock it up, and you know exactly who has a key. There's accountability for who has access to the evidence. It's not just left lying around where somebody might fiddle with it after the fact, which would obviously be bad. And then in the analysis process, you have to make sure you're not modifying the data that you're analyzing, and of course reporting to the proper authority, whether it's local police, state police, but more typically federal, FBI. And Emerson Scott's talk was fascinating for a number of reasons, not the least of which that they have their own dedicated forensics team. I would say that's not typical. That's not the norm. Most IT shops don't have the expertise to do this in-house. Actually, more typically, they don't have any interest or business rationale to have a team that to support this kind of data-intensive operation, because it's very time-consuming. Typically, companies will outsource this when and if they have a problem. When they have a problem. They'll outsource it because it's a very specific skill set that requires a lot of training. Mandiant is a company name I've heard thrown around a lot in terms of getting Mandiant, which used to be their own company, and now apparently FireEye owns them. So FireEye is getting huge in this space as well. But Mandiant is a company that can come in and do your digital forensics for you and make sure it's done the right way, maintaining a chain of evidence, chain of custody. On the topic of the FBI, this is a blurred picture of Meredith Burkhart, who's a CMIS grad, an SIUE grad from back in the day, and she works for the FBI Cyber Division. She's talked to my InfoSec class in the past. I couldn't get her in this semester, which is a shame because she's a wonderful speaker. One of the things, and I've got it blurred because she said the big problem the FBI has is with attribution. Now, attribution is not just knowing who perpetrated the crime. They gather all the evidence, they analyze it. More likely than not, they know who did it, but they're not allowed to point their finger. They're not allowed to turn it over to the Justice Department for prosecution because it becomes a political issue as opposed to a legal issue. So the difference is if the hackers or criminals are in another country, any other, be it North Korea, China, Russia, pick your flavor for the week. But a lot of times it's not politically expedient to point the finger at another country because you're could start a war, could start retaliation, it could impact trade negotiations, it could impact any number of economic factors, which maybe we're not ready to do. So this, once you get at a macro kind of global law enforcement level, this gets very tricky, but interesting to look at. So let's say you think, this is pretty cool. I'd like to learn more about forensics. There are a lot of free tools to try out. I would encourage you to check out this link. This one's a couple of years old, but there are a lot of links on YouTube like this that give you a top 10 list of digital forensics tools that are free to download and play around with. So again, if you're looking for a career in cybersecurity, it'd be nice to have a story to tell in the interview of how you downloaded some of these tools and played around with them to see how they work. It makes you sound like you're seriously interested in cyber. And I don't want you to pretend to be interested in cyber. That's just a way to demonstrate your actual interest. So that's it. We've reached the end of the textbook. I want to kind of underscore one final point, and I hope I've spun a story throughout the semester that really brings this home for you, just chapter after chapter after chapter, topic after topic after topic, that there's no such thing as 100% security. But if you want to get close, as far as I can tell, there's only one way to ensure that you have the best possible information security, and that is by adopting a framework. I don't care whether it's NIST, ITIL, COBIT, ISO, SANS, any number of information security frameworks. There are a lot out there. NIST is certainly the one that we've spent the most time on, but there are others. I think that's the big answer. And again, if that comes up with an interview, I think that'd be a fair answer. You know, use a framework, use a model, use a template, a blueprint, however you want to think of it. I think that's the big answer. That's the big wisdom I have to share with you here at the end of the semester. So I'll see you guys in class for an exam, and then we'll have one more session face-to-face, and I think that will be that for the semester. So look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.